Last summer at my sailing club, so I'm a member at Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron.
Yeah.
And in the summer, they have a skipper's briefing. And that is, like, I'd like to say to a bloke, okay, imagine you walk into a bar of 60 women and not one woman says hello to you, not one.
Yeah.
Not one. Can you imagine how, like, just imagine A, how intimidating that is, B, rather than, it was so interesting. And I just thought, well, fuck this. I'm going to go and sit right up next to the Commodore. So I did, and you, like, it's just sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't. But
absolutely. Discrimination, whether it be, undercurrent or intent, it doesn't matter. You kind of embed all of that and you laugh it off and you joke it off and whatever. But there are times when it just gets to you. It just gets it gets beyond the pole and you just think, this is too hard. And so in various times in my life, that's been the case where I've just gone, no, this is too hard. And coming to Tasmania was an interesting dilemma in the sense that I let go of all my established hard-earned cred in Queensland, where I ran my business and had been involved in the marina construction and was well known, and everybody kind of had come to accept how I was. And I came to Tasmania with nobody knowing me and nobody knowing my boating history and having to start again to kind of to establish my cred.
Yeah.
And is that, and I'd ask the question, would that have been different if I'd been a guy than if I'm a girl? Yeah. Would I have been treated with automatic recognition? Yeah. When I didn't ever seek recognition anyway, because I wasn't a racer. I wasn't in the club network, and I've never been in the club network. It's not my scene, because to me it feels too much like the old boys club or a schoolyard bitchiness. And a lot of the time for me in clubs, the experience I've had is that they spend more time talking about what they're going to do than doing anything.
Or, the bitchiness is really interesting. I have a racing boat called No Man's Land. It is plastic. We have Fairwinds, our beautiful, classic, beautiful boat. But I do love racing. And so I race on a Sydney 38 called No Man's Land. It's an all-girls crew. And our goal was to race in the 2020. I was taking a group of novices all the way through to the AWKR, the Australian Women's Keelboat Regatta. And in one of our lead-up regattas, I drove to the yacht club that we were based in. I'm not going to say which yacht club it was. It wasn't Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron. It was another yacht club. I drove my car, I parked, I had my jacket. My jacket has No Man's Land on the back. And I was getting out of my car and a guy pulled up next to me and I just, said, good morning, smiled. And he said, oh, it's good. I'm really happy to bump into you. And I said, oh, how so? And he said, guess what? We've renamed your boat. And I said, oh, really? What have you renamed it to? That's funny. And he said, we've called it Wasteland because that boat's wasted on a group of women. Well, I wished in that moment that I was 6'3" and I could punch this guy to kingdom come. But you just have to smile. You just have to smile and go, yeah. So the best way to sort of counter that was I got onto the boat, sat the girls down and went, this guy is from boat. I'm not going to say the name. We are going to fucking beat them. And we did. That was the only thing I wanted to do that day. That was the only thing.
I know. And it was the same. Like I, in a past life when we were living in Queensland, my partner and I, for the owners of the marina, constructed the marina, set up the businesses. We set up the chandlery, the brokerage, the cafe, the boatyard, ran the marina, did the whole thing, set it all up, constructed the pontoons.
You knew it inside out.
I did the slump test on every batch of concrete that went into every pour of every pontoon.
Yeah.
Because we didn't pay another company to build the marina. We built the marina. We had one supervisor from a marina building company, and the rest of it was just us. And we had, workers and whatnot. And the community knew that, and I was the public face of the promotions as it went forward. And then eventually we left, and because apart from anything else, because we weren't being paid equally, even though in actual fact I was working more hours than Greg was, and I was the only person who could do every single job in the place, whereas Greg only did the outside construction work. I did outside construction work, I did inside stuff, and I ran the accounting and the businesses as well. And so we weren't being paid equally, and one thing led to another. We were fed up. We discovered that we weren't really shopkeepers, and we were ready to pass it on. So we left. And then I started my sail training business. And I had one of the blokes who ran a charter business there. He watched me in and out of that marina. He knew everything I'd done. He was one of the first boats that, berthed in the marina. He knew all the things that I did. He knew all of the stuff that I'd done. And yet when I started operating my boat, and I had a commercial skipper's ticket, I'm a Master 5, and he watched every time I pulled my boat in and out of that berth with his arms crossed, standing there like a big fat slob, which he was, just waiting for me to mess up.
Yeah.
And one day I came in, and it was 2 years later, literally 2 years later. I came in, it was blowing 35 knots. I was on my own because I dropped people off at the island because they were staying over on the island. And so I was just coming back on my own. It was blowing 35 knots. I pulled the boat into my pen and I tied it up on my own. No problems. It was fine. And the next day he was coming in towards me and he said, "Good job, Jen." And that was all he said. And then all of a sudden, all the other commercial guys started talking to me. But it took 2 years plus a year of building and setting up that marina and dealing with every boat that came into the berth. It was just beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
But I just smiled sweetly and went, sure. Not you fucking asshole, which is what I wanted to say to him.
Wanting to be part of the solution, because that's really what I think we've established there's a problem, and now wanting to be part of the solution. What do you see the solutions as being? If our objective is to because I'm telling you, every club out there that's listening to this will be interested.
One of the things for me is that the club culture on its own either has to change or people need to have an avenue outside the club culture.
What does that mean? Can you go into a bit more detail with what that means?
Yeah, I can. If you can't buy a boat and if you're not of the competitive streak, then clubs don't offer an avenue that welcomes you.
Apart from the bar.
That's why we apart from working in the kitchen.
Or working the bar. Kitchen. Yeah.
Yes, behind the bar or working the kitchen in the club, there is no avenue for you. And clubs are starting gradually to have a bit more of a cruising culture.
Yep.
And acknowledging and recognising their cruising members.
Yep.
And I think that's a big leap in the right direction, because at the moment, if you want to learn to sail, and you don't want to race, because the racing culture is a stressful culture in most instances for most people. And it's also a monoculture in that you get given a job and that's the only job you do on that boat, because you're building a team of, you know, a well-oiled machine, hopefully, that's going to do well in the races. And so it's all about the competition. It's not about learning to sail. And it's not about boat management, and it's not about the skills that are required to be a boat owner. So if that's your aspiration, there's none of that there, because somebody else just pays for a new sail to be built when one gets torn, or somebody else pays for, repair on the engine, whatever it might be. And it doesn't feel like your responsibility. It doesn't feel like you're learning any skills in that process. So what we did down here in the Water Women group was, I didn't want it to just be another group where women met and talked about boating and told us what their husbands told them. I wanted it to be an active sailing group. And so what we do is we take on Fridays usually, because I don't know if you've heard, in Victoria, do you have WAGs? Wednesday afternoon gentlemen's sailing?
Yes, we do. Yes, I've never heard it called that, but yes.
That's what the acronym is, Wednesday afternoon gentlemen's sailing. So we have flying, which is Friday ladies yachting. And what we don't do is we don't race.
Yeah.
And that then allows people to learn all the roles on the boat.
Yeah.
And it allows them to take the helm. It allows them to feel what it feels like to steer a boat. It allows them to build confidence in a totally unstressful, non-competitive situation. Now, I think it would be great for men to be able to have that experience too, because my belief and my experience from years of sail training with couples has been that women like holistic views. They want to understand why they're doing something, not just do it. Mm. Men are quite happy not to be told the why and just the what.
Yeah.
And so when they learn only the what, they have no ability to describe the why to anyone else.
That's really interesting. I've never sort of thought about it like that before. That's really interesting.
So because the guys don't want to make other guys feel like they're being taught to suck eggs. For me, when I teach sailing, which I haven't done officially kind of thing for a long time, but I mean, I'm doing it every time I go out with the girls. Yeah. It's like, okay, let's talk about points of sail. Let's talk about the terminology. Let's learn about the difference between the boat being pushed along or being pulled along. Yeah. When you get to the wind on the beam. And, all of those things, it doesn't mean that we're not sailing and having a good time, and then we'll anchor, have lunch, and then we'll come back and sail back. So we hoist the sails twice. We do all of these things twice, and everybody just gets to experience something and have their hands on something. Yeah. But if the weather's bad, we don't go. Yeah. We don't do it as a commitment. We do it as we'll give a call out on Thursday afternoon to see whether we're going to go on Friday.
Literally, I put a call out to 40 women, and within 24 hours, it was amazing because I was overseas when I did it. I was working overseas, and so, I just thought, right, I'm going to email this guy. And they weren't girlfriends. They were people that I didn't want it to be sort of people who were coming along just to hang out with friends. I wanted it to be people who genuinely wanted to learn a new skill. So, I've got one girl, Jess, who was the very first girl to sign up. She'd been on a Hong Kong ferry. That was her experience of sailing. Now, in retrospect, I made life very, very hard for myself. But what's really interesting here is that there's no one way to teach sailing. And what you're sort of talking about has certainly been my experience as well. And I must say that I've been incredibly well supported by my partner and his group of friends who sail with him on fair winds, who are all fabulously woke guys who are, but, you know, so into this group of women being involved and getting passionate and learning about sailing. But it's taken a long time for them to realise that that women do learn in a different way, and that they, you know, that there is this sort of desire to learn all about the names and the technology and how things are working. And they've found that a bit frustrating because they're like, just pull the fucking rope. And the other thing that challenges them is the debrief session after, after
exactly.
Yeah.
So you have on the list things like changing the club culture, recognising the difference in the learning capabilities and approaches, not just capabilities, because that's a diminishing term, really. It's approach for teaching women. Changing the culture so that men are able to really assist their female crew instead of just operating on the way they were taught.
Yeah.
Because they weren't really taught. They just intuited.
Yeah.
Because they did it for long enough and they loved the mateship and all the other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Changing the culture in the yacht club world to allow for a better representation of cruisers, and that may be as simple as allowing club members to answer a survey. And they certainly did that down in a local yacht club because they wanted to find out how many members were cruisers. The interesting thing about cruising is generally that it's a much more independent thing, whereas racing is a collective thing. You have to have a couple of boats on the water to have a race, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to have a group of people who are all going out, who all egg each other on. It's very much this safety in numbers thing, whereas cruising, from my perspective and from my years of cruising, which was 10 years of living aboard and sailing through the South Pacific and up to North America and Alaska and various places, all of that was done independently.
Yeah.
So it was just me and my partner.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
We didn't do any rallies. We didn't do any of the passage crossings in company, because the bottom line is, when you're at sea, really at sea, not just in a race around the harbour, but really at sea, there is no one but you. Yeah. So you have to control and manage all of the situational things that arise.
Yeah.
And that's a very different mindset.
It's a very different mindset.
Some people are not suited to it.
Mm.
So some people love the racing genre. They fit in well, just like you do. For me, it's my worst nightmare.
It's funny though. I think it's funny because if we're on Pittwater, which is my or we circumnavigated Tassie 2 years ago now, and the boat was there for the wooden boat show. No. We just
independently.
Just did it independently. But to get the boat it went down the west coast and then around and up to Hobart, and then we spent a whole of January just cruising before the wooden boat show, which was just absolutely amazing. Likewise, I've done a huge amount of cruising in Europe, and we ran a flotilla company, so that was that was all about cruising. Yeah. But Melbourne is possibly the worst place to cruise. There is nowhere to go. So I think it's very fortunate to be based in Tassie. However, what I will say to that is Royal Melbourne has some really great active young members, and over the Australia Day weekend they put together something that challenged us. I didn't take part in it because there was no racing, but at the same time, it involved a lot of people, and it was cruising. And they had a lot of fun. It was over 4 days. It was very, very successful. And I think what you talk about is that entry level into a sport that removes the stress. And I think that's super important.
Let's think about this for an example. You can learn to go play tennis. You can go to a tennis coach and but you don't have to be a competitive tennis player.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Exactly.
Or you can go to your local community courts and you can pick up a racket and a ball and you can just play tennis.
Yeah.
Right? You can go cycling and you don't have to be a racing cycler.
Yeah.
Okay? But the moment you start saying, I want to go sailing, you have to either own a boat or go to a yacht club and race. You can do the Discovery Day things that yacht clubs have.
Yeah.
But that's a one-off moment. But if you don't like, and usually those things end up being completed by a race.
Yeah.
But if you don't like racing, then you don't have an avenue unless you have a friend that has a boat.
What would be your, if you could sort of, what would your message be to guys that, because I'm really interested for anyone who's got a mother, a daughter, a sister, a niece, a friend, an aunt. This conversation is relevant to you. A wife.
Well, certainly as a sale trainer, as with my target market being couples mostly. I was a marriage guidance counsellor as well in the process of being a sale trainer in some cases. But my message is that you don't teach someone to drive a car by putting them in peak hour traffic in the middle of the freeway. You gradually take the back roads, you do it quietly, you do it softly, and then you teach them to reverse park when they're driving into a park.
Yeah.
You do that in a shopping centre car park. You don't do it in the middle of the street in a busy road.
Yeah.
And learning to sail, for the most part, shouldn't be that stressful. And it shouldn't require yelling. In fact, one of the key messages on my cruisability website was, we don't yell.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people came because of that one sentence. That one sentence, we don't yell.
Yeah.
Because all of their sailing experiences had been in the racing genre, and it had all been stressful, close-knit starts, yelling, screaming. Even if it's not yelling at the person, it increases the stress level.
Yeah.
And so to learn to sail. And the other thing that is, for me, that is so crucial, and this is what I don't see happening on the few race boats that I've been on in the circumstances that I've been on them, is that terminology is everything. Because if you think about learning, again, the analogy of learning to drive a car, if you say, put your foot on the accelerator, even if you've never driven a car before, it's the long pedal. It's on the right hand, under your right hand foot. All of this, and embedded in the word accelerate is the word that the engine will rev faster, and if it revs faster, therefore it's going to, if it's an automatic, it'll start climbing up the gears. If it's a manual, you're going to have to change gears. All of that information. It's embedded from your childhood, from your life. But it's not embedded when you say ease the sheet or hoist the halyard. It's not embedded. It doesn't make sense for that person unless they've had years of sailing experience.
Yeah.
And so you have to step back and think about it externally from their perspective, from the person who you're trying to share the knowledge with. That's the thing.
I think they're fantastic messages. I would add to that as well, when you see a woman at the club, say hi. Ask her what boat she's sailing on. Ask what boat she sailed on last week. Ask her if she'd like to come out on your boat. Don't be frightened. You know, when you're walking down the pier, like, because we have this long pier, you know, ask people what they're doing. Where are they going? What do they enjoy? What did they learn? You know, there are so many ways to start a conversation.
And women need to change this culture as well.
Yeah.
Because women, this is an interesting thing that happened for me very early in my boating career, is that when I first got with my partner, which was 33 years ago, I bought into the boat because I'd been previously in a situation where I didn't have financial control of my share of the boat, so I would never felt like it was my boat. You know, I didn't feel any sense of control or a right to make decisions on the boat. And I got very angry with him. And we were newly in love. We were setting out on an adventure. We were sailing away together, and he would constantly say, "My boat."
Yeah.
And he would always say, "My boat," and I would say, "No. I bought in specifically so that it's our boat."
Yeah.
Boat. And he said, "Well, yes, but you can say my boat too."
Yeah. But
he said, "It's fine. You can say my boat too." And from the moment I started saying my boat instead of our boat, I became the person who had as much right and in control.
Yes.
Before
isn't that fantastic?
I have to ask permission. And so as women, we need to feel more like we have a right.
Yes, which is just, you know, in yoga we call it taking up space. You know, energetically take up space. You have a right to be there.
And you don't want to be triggered. You don't want to allow the victim mentality of being proud get you down. But I would say with caution, you have to draw the line between tolerating and educating the entrenched male behaviour and drawing a line to where it becomes abusive. Because it can become abusive, or
I think what's really
intentionally destructive.
And I think that's where we rely upon other guys pulling that kind of behaviour up as well. You know, just a little, "Hey mate, that's not a helpful comment." You know, that's less than helpful. You know, give her a hand, give her some time, give her some space, she'll work it out. And I think that's what, you know, there's nothing on our boat that we can't do that a guy can do, but it will take us longer. You know, we're not the biggest people in the world. It will just take us longer, but we will get there.
We just get better winch handles and bigger winches.
Bigger winches. We need bigger winches. It's so funny. Hey, listen, absolutely fantastic to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time. It's just been amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's lovely. Amazing. It feels like Joy is clever. She's linked us up, and we're obviously kindred spirits.
Kindred spirits.
Which the name of one of my boats.